My mother transformed my 7-year-old sister into a pawn in her twisted game for affection. That day, she made Emily write those words on our father's photograph. I watched from the kitchen doorway as she guided Emily's small hand across the picture, helping her form each letter that spelled out the phrase that would haunt our family forever. The way she smiled when Dad's face crumbled still makes my stomach turn even now, months later. I tried to convince her to stop using Emily as a weapon in her war for love and attention, but she just looked at me with those cold eyes and said Emily had already chosen her side. She was simply making sure the choice stuck. I kept my mouth shut after that conversation, thinking maybe it would pass. Thinking maybe Mom would realize what she was doing to our family. That was 5 months ago, and I was wrong about everything. This morning changed everything when I found her in our backyard, her fingernails leaving bloody trails down the wooden fence as she screamed Emily's name into the dawn air. The neighbors called the police before I could even process what I was seeing. Her hands were shredded and bleeding, leaving red smears on the white paint as she clawed and screamed like something had broken inside her mind. The way she kept calling for Emily, begging her to come back, to choose her again, it was like watching someone's soul shatter in real time. It all started 3 weeks ago when my 7-year-old sister made an innocent comment that sent our mother spiraling into madness. Mom was in the kitchen preparing dinner, moving between the stove and counter with practiced efficiency, when Emily came running in wearing her favorite purple dress. Her little feet barely made a sound on the tile floor as she tugged on Mom's apron, her face bright with excitement about something Dad was doing in the living room. Mom barely glanced down, too focused on not burning the chicken she was pan-frying. Emily's voice was high and sweet as she tried to get Mom's attention, pulling harder on the fabric and bouncing on her toes the way she did when she was really excited about something. Dad was in the living room wearing Emily's Elsa costume from last Halloween, the blue fabric stretched comically over his broad shoulders. He'd put on the blonde wig and everything, even attempting to sing Let It Go in a ridiculous falsetto that had Emily giggling uncontrollably. She wanted Mom to see, needed her to witness this moment of pure joy and silliness that made our house feel like a home. But Mom was too busy with dinner, too focused on the responsibilities that always seemed to weigh her down. She gave Emily a distracted pat on the head and told her she'd look later, after the food was ready. That's when Emily said it, in that innocent way children do when they don't understand the weight of their words. She put her hands on her hips in a perfect imitation of Mom's stern pose and said in a sing-song voice that she was boring just like Mommy, always cooking and never having fun. Then she added the words that would change everything, saying that's why she loved Daddy more, because he knew how to play and laugh and be silly. She giggled as she said it, not seeing how Mom's hands had stopped moving, how her shoulders had tensed, how the spatula in her hand trembled slightly. Emily just skipped back to the living room to rejoin Dad in their costume party, leaving Mom standing alone in the kitchen with those words echoing in her ears. I saw Mom's face in that moment, watched the way her expression shifted from mild annoyance to something darker. The hurt in her eyes was quickly replaced by something I'd never seen before, a determination that made my skin crawl. She finished making dinner in complete silence, serving our plates with mechanical precision. Dad tried to joke about his Elsa performance during the meal, but Mom's smile was different, calculated in a way that made me lose my appetite. Emily chattered on about her day at school, oblivious to the storm brewing across the table. The next evening, everything changed when Mom suddenly decided she wanted to be part of the fun. She abandoned the dishes in the sink, something she never did, and crawled into the blanket fort Emily and Dad had built in the living room. I watched from my homework spot at the dining table as she wiggled through the tunnel of sheets and couch cushions, making silly voices for Emily's stuffed animals. Dad looked surprised but pleased, thinking maybe Mom was finally loosening up. Emily was delighted, showing Mom all the secret passages and hidden treasure they'd stashed throughout their construction. When Emily asked for ice cream after dinner that night, something usually reserved for special occasions, Mom said yes immediately without even checking what flavor we had. Dad raised an eyebrow at this break in routine, but Mom just winked at him and headed to the freezer. She made it into a whole production, setting up an ice cream sundae bar on the kitchen counter with all the toppings she could find. Then she took it further, playfully dabbing ice cream on Dad's nose and slowly, deliberately licking it off while maintaining eye contact. Emily squealed with laughter at the sight, but I saw Dad's confusion at this sudden shift in Mom's behavior. A few days later, the competition became more obvious when I watched Mom and Emily rolling down the hill in our backyard. It was a muddy mess from recent rain, and Mom was wearing the expensive sundress Dad had bought her for her birthday just 2 weeks before. The delicate fabric was ruined within minutes, grass stains and mud destroying the pale pink material. Dad came outside when he heard the commotion, and I saw his face go pale at the sight of the ruined dress. It had cost him $300, money we didn't really have to spare. But Mom just laughed it off, saying memories were more important than material things, that Emily's happiness was worth more than any dress. We all wanted to believe this was just Mom learning to loosen up and have fun with Emily. Dad even commented that night about how nice it was to see them bonding. But something felt wrong to me. The way Mom's eyes would flick to Dad's face whenever she made Emily laugh, checking to see if he was watching, if he was noticing how much fun she could be. It felt less like genuine play and more like a performance, one where Dad was the unwilling audience and Emily was an unknowing prop. The pattern emerged slowly at first, so subtle we almost missed it. Dad came home from work one evening with a special surprise for Emily, a 1,000-piece puzzle featuring characters from her favorite movie. They'd been working on puzzles together every Thursday night for months, their special tradition. But the moment Mom saw the puzzle box, she announced that she and Emily were going out for ice cream instead. Not Dad, not me, just the two of them for a girls' night out. I saw Dad's face fall as Emily jumped up excitedly, abandoning the puzzle without a second thought. He spent that evening alone at the dining table, sorting edge pieces by himself while Mom and Emily were gone for 2 hours. This became Mom's new strategy for winning Emily's affection. Every time Dad planned something special, Mom would swoop in with something better, something more exciting, something that excluded Dad entirely. When he bought tickets to the Children's Museum, Mom suddenly decided that was the perfect day for a shopping spree at the toy store. When he suggested a bike ride in the park, Mom announced a trip to the water park instead. Emily was 7. She didn't understand the game being played. She just knew she was getting extra attention and treats, and what child would complain about that? The breaking point came during what should have been a peaceful family art session on a Saturday afternoon. Dad had set up the dining table with paper and crayons, wanting us all to draw together like we used to when Emily was younger. But Mom kept whispering in Emily's ear, guiding her hand, suggesting what to draw. I watched in horror as she helped Emily draw a picture of our family, where Dad had a big frown on his face and the words, "I love Mommy more," scrawled across the top in Emily's shaky handwriting. When it came time to share our drawings, Emily proudly held up her creation. Dad's shoulders slumped when he saw it, the hurt evident in his eyes. Mom beamed like she'd won a prize, reaching over to ruffle Emily's hair and tell her what a good artist she was. After that day, Mom's behavior escalated beyond simple competition. She started pushing boundaries in ways that made me genuinely worried for Emily's safety. The finger paint incident happened on a Tuesday afternoon when Dad was still at work. I came home from school to find Mom and Emily painting directly on our living room walls with their hands. Not on paper taped to the walls, but on the actual white paint Dad had spent a weekend applying just 6 months earlier. The walls were covered in handprints and swirls of color, paint dripping onto the carpet below. When Dad got home and saw the mess, he tried to stay calm, but I could see the vein pulsing in his forehead. He asked Mom what she was thinking, and she just grabbed Emily's paint-covered hand and ran outside, both of them giggling like conspirators. Dad and I spent 3 hours that night scrubbing the walls, trying to remove the paint before it set permanently. Some of it wouldn't come off, and we had to primer over it. The whole time we could hear Mom and Emily playing in the backyard, Mom's laughter louder than necessary, making sure we knew how much fun they were having while we cleaned. But nothing prepared me for the day I caught them on the roof. I was in my room doing homework when I heard Emily's voice coming from above me, which made no sense since her room was down the hall. I went up to the attic to investigate and found the access hatch to the roof wide open. My heart stopped when I saw Mom helping Emily through the opening onto the slanted roof that had no safety rails. Nothing to stop a fall except the gutters that Dad always said were too weak to hold any real weight. I screamed at them to stop, my voice cracking with panic. The roof slanted at a sharp angle, and Emily was wearing smooth-soled shoes that had no grip. Mom just rolled her eyes at me and said I was being dramatic, that they were just having an adventure. She said I was as boring as Dad, always worried about rules and safety instead of living in the moment. Emily looked uncertain up there, gripping Mom's hand tightly, but she trusted Mom to keep her safe. I threatened to call Dad, and only then did Mom help Emily back inside, but not before making sure Emily heard her call me a spoilsport who ruined all their fun. The car incident happened the following Tuesday and still gives me nightmares. Dad and I had gone into the grocery store to grab snacks for movie night, leaving Mom and Emily in the car with the engine running for the air conditioning. It was supposed to be a quick 5-minute trip, just grabbing popcorn and candy. But when we came out, what we saw made both of us freeze in absolute horror. Emily was sitting in the driver's seat of Mom's SUV, her tiny hands on the steering wheel, while Mom sat in the passenger seat encouraging her. The parking lot was busy with cars coming and going, families loading groceries, kids running between vehicles. But there was Emily, barely able to see over the dashboard even with the seat pushed all the way forward, pressing her foot against the pedals while Mom laughed and gave her instructions. We started running when we saw the car lurch forward, Emily's foot finding the gas pedal. She pressed too hard and the SUV jumped, slamming into a parked sedan with a sickening crunch of metal on metal. The owner of the damaged car came running out of the store, fury and confusion on his face. Dad immediately took control of the situation, apologizing profusely and taking full blame for the accident. He handed over his insurance information and $500 in cash from his wallet, money I knew was supposed to last us until his next paycheck. While Dad dealt with the angry car owner and gathering crowd, Mom was actually praising Emily, telling her she did great for her first time driving, that it was just a little bump and nothing to worry about. That night, after Emily was in bed, I went to check on her. She was curled up in her princess bed, looking smaller than usual under her pink comforter. When I sat down on the edge of her mattress, she rolled over and looked at me with eyes that seemed too old for her 7 years. She whispered that Mommy was starting to scare her, that the games weren't fun anymore, but she didn't know how to say no. She said Mom got a funny look in her eyes when she talked about Dad, a look that made Emily's tummy hurt. Dad and I knew we had to do something before Mom's behavior caused serious harm. The next morning, we sat her down for what we hoped would be a calm, rational conversation. Dad spoke first, his voice gentle but firm, explaining that her competitive behavior was frightening Emily and creating an unhealthy dynamic in our family. I added that Emily had expressly said she was scared, that the dangerous activities were too much for a 7-year-old to handle. We weren't trying to attack Mom. We just wanted her to understand the impact of her actions. Mom's face went through a series of transformations as we spoke. First confusion, then hurt, then a rage that made me instinctively lean back in my chair. She accused us of ganging up on her, of trying to turn Emily against the fun parent because we were jealous. She said Emily loved her more now, that Emily had chosen her over Dad and we couldn't handle it. When Dad tried to explain that this wasn't about winning or losing, but about Emily's well-being, Mom stood up so fast her chair fell backward. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. The next day, we discovered just how far Mom was willing to go in this twisted competition. Dad went to the bank to withdraw money for groceries and found our savings account empty. $4,000 gone. Money we'd been saving for house repairs and emergency medical expenses wiped out in a single transaction. When he called the bank, they told him Mom had withdrawn it all the previous day. He found the receipt in her purse, left carelessly on the kitchen counter. She'd spent every penny on a massive commercial-grade bounce house for the backyard. When Dad confronted her about the money, Mom's response was chilling in its simplicity. She said Emily would love the bounce house, that it would make her the coolest mom on the block. She didn't apologize for taking the money without discussion, didn't acknowledge that it was meant for necessities. In her mind, being the fun parent was worth any cost, any sacrifice, even if it meant we couldn't afford to fix the leaking roof or pay for Emily's upcoming dental work. The bounce house was so large it took up most of our backyard, this garish monstrosity of bright colors and constant noise from the air pump. Emily was excited at first, but even she seemed overwhelmed by the sheer excess of it. The neighborhood kids started showing up uninvited, and Mom encouraged it, reveling in being the cool mom who let kids do whatever they wanted. Dad spent hours on the phone with the bank, trying to understand our options, while I watched Emily become increasingly uncomfortable with the chaos Mom had created. But the axe incident was when I truly understood that Mom had lost all sense of reality and safety. I came home from school on a Thursday afternoon to find Emily in the backyard holding Dad's axe, the heavy one he used for splitting firewood. Blood was running down her small leg from a gash on her shin, and her hands were shaking as she tried to hold the too-heavy tool. Mom stood nearby, actually clapping and cheering, telling Emily she was doing great, that tough girls didn't cry about little cuts. The axe was nearly as tall as Emily, and she could barely lift it, let alone swing it safely. Mom had apparently decided that Emily needed to learn real-life skills, and that 7 was the perfect age to start chopping wood. Never mind that Emily could barely carry her backpack without help, or that the axe was sharp enough to cause serious injury with even a small mistake. Mom was so focused on being the parent who let Emily do grown-up things that she couldn't see the terror in Emily's eyes or the danger of the situation. I ran forward and grabbed the axe from Emily's hands while Dad, who had heard my scream from inside, came rushing out. He scooped Emily up, blood now running more freely from the cut on her leg, and carried her inside. Mom followed us, not apologizing or showing concern, but actually yelling at us for ruining their bonding activity. She said we were making Emily soft, that we were the reason she would grow up weak and dependent. Even as Dad cleaned and bandaged Emily's wound, Mom stood in the doorway, insisting it was just a scratch and we were overreacting. That night, Dad and I made a decision that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. We sat Mom down after Emily was asleep and delivered an ultimatum. Either she stopped this dangerous behavior immediately, or Dad would take Emily and me and leave. I'd never seen Dad threaten to break up our family before, but the look in his eyes told me he was serious. He would do whatever it took to protect Emily from Mom's increasingly erratic behavior. Mom scoffed at first, laughing like we were joking. But when she saw our faces, when she realized we meant every word, something shifted. She agreed to stop, to go back to being a normal parent who prioritized safety over fun. She even apologized, though it felt hollow, like she was saying what we wanted to hear rather than truly understanding what she'd done wrong. We wanted to believe her, needed to believe that our family could heal from this. The peace lasted exactly 2 days before everything fell apart in the most horrific way possible. We got the call on a Tuesday evening. Mom's voice on the phone was hysterical, sobbing so hard we could barely understand her words. She kept saying she messed up, that it was bad, that we needed to come to the hospital right away. Dad drove while I sat in the passenger seat, my hands shaking as I tried to call Mom back for more information. She wouldn't answer. We broke every speed limit getting to the hospital, running red lights and weaving through traffic. The 20-minute drive felt like hours, my mind cycling through every possible scenario. When we finally reached the emergency room, we found Mom in the waiting area, soaking wet and shaking uncontrollably. Her clothes were drenched, her hair hanging in wet strings around her face. She looked up when she saw us, and the guilt in her eyes told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. Through hysterical sobs, Mom explained what had happened at the old quarry that afternoon. She'd taken Emily there for what she called a swimming adventure, despite knowing the place was dangerous and officially off limits. The quarry had been abandoned for years, with no lifeguards, no safety equipment, and water of unknown depth. But Mom had decided it would be their secret spot, their special place away from boring rules and restrictions. She'd started by encouraging Emily to jump from the lower rocks, maybe 5 or 6 feet above the water. When Emily succeeded, Mom praised her lavishly, calling her brave and special. Then she pointed to higher rocks, telling Emily that big girls jumped from up there. Emily was scared but wanted to please Mom, wanted to be the brave girl Mom said she was. After Emily jumped from 10 feet, then 15, then 20, each time landing safely but growing more frightened, Mom pointed to even higher rocks. The 20-foot jump had been hard for Emily. She'd twisted her ankle on landing, coming up from the water crying and asking to stop. But Mom, lost in her need to be the fun parent, the parent Emily loved most, had dismissed her tears. She told Emily she was being dramatic, that the pain would go away, that one more jump would make her the bravest girl in the world. Mom admitted she'd had a bad feeling, a voice in her head saying this was too dangerous. But she pushed it aside because she wanted to give Emily an adventure Dad would never allow. The 30-foot rock was different from the others. It was wet from spray, covered in a thin layer of algae that made it slippery. Emily had stood at the edge, looking down at the water so far below, visibly trembling. She told Mom she was scared, that her ankle hurt, that she wanted to go home. But Mom, standing safely on the ground, had called up to her, saying she could do it, that she was almost the bravest girl ever. Just one more jump. Mom used the words she knew would work, asking Emily if she wanted to be a baby like Dad would want, or brave like Mommy knew she could be. Emily had tried to position herself for the jump, but her injured ankle gave out. Her foot slipped on the algae-covered rock, and instead of jumping out into the deep water, she fell straight down, hitting the shallow water near the rock face. Mom said she heard the crack even from where she stood, a sound that would haunt her forever. Emily hit the water wrong, her body at an angle that sent all the impact through her spine. She didn't come back up. Mom had to jump in after her, pulling Emily's limp body to the surface. Emily wasn't responding, wasn't moving, barely breathing. Mom had screamed for help that wouldn't come in that isolated place, then somehow managed to get Emily to the car and drive to the hospital while trying to keep her conscious. She'd run every red light, honking constantly, praying the whole way. Emily was alive when they reached the hospital, but the doctors couldn't promise she'd stay that way. We waited in that emergency room for 12 eternal hours, the longest night of our lives. Dad paced constantly, wearing a path in the industrial carpet. Mom sat huddled in a corner, periodically breaking into fresh sobs. I couldn't do anything but stare at the clock, watching minutes tick by like hours. Other families came and went, their emergencies resolved, while we waited to learn if Emily would survive Mom's desperate need to be loved. When the doctor finally emerged, still in surgical scrubs, his face told us everything before he spoke. Emily was alive, but the damage was severe. Her spinal cord was nearly severed at the L2 vertebra. The fall had caused massive trauma, and while they'd managed to stabilize her, the prognosis was grim. She might never walk again. The doctors would need to perform multiple surgeries, and even then, recovery was uncertain. Best-case scenario involved years of physical therapy with limited mobility. Worst case meant permanent paralysis from the waist down. I watched Dad crumble when he heard those words. This man who had always been our rock, who never showed weakness, broke down completely. Tears streamed down his face as he gripped the doctor's arm, begging to know if there was anything else they could do, any treatment they hadn't considered. The doctor's compassion was evident, but so was the truth. Modern medicine had limits, and Emily's injury had crossed them. She was 7 years old and might never run, jump, or play like a normal child again. They let us see Emily after another hour of waiting. She was awake but heavily sedated, her small body dwarfed by the hospital bed and medical equipment. Tubes and wires connected her to various machines, each beep a reminder of how close we'd come to losing her. When she saw us, her eyes focused first on Dad, then me, then finally on Mom. The fear that flashed across her face when she saw her mother broke my heart all over again. Emily's voice was weak but clear when she spoke. She looked directly at Mom and said words that would echo through our family forever. She told Mom she scared her, that she didn't want her there, that she should go away. The hurt in Mom's eyes was nothing compared to the relief in Emily's when hospital security approached and asked Mom to step outside. Emily's heart rate, visible on the monitor, actually slowed when Mom left the room. Dad took control in that moment with a calm fury I'd never seen before. He told Mom to leave, that she'd done enough damage, that Emily's wishes would be respected. When Mom tried to protest, tried to claim her rights as a mother, Dad's voice dropped to a dangerous level. He reminded her that she had nearly killed their daughter for the sake of a competition that existed only in her mind. Security escorted Mom out while she sobbed about not meaning for this to happen, about only wanting to be loved. Through the window of Emily's room, I watched Dad's transformation as he dealt with Mom in the hallway. The grief-stricken father became someone harder, someone who had found his line in the sand. His jaw was clenched as Mom gestured wildly, trying to explain herself, trying to minimize what had happened. But every time she tried to move toward Emily's room, Dad blocked her path. He wasn't violent, wasn't loud, but his presence was an immovable wall between Mom and the daughter she'd nearly destroyed. The doctor returned with more detailed information about Emily's condition, showing us X-rays on a tablet that revealed the true extent of the damage. The vertebrae were fractured, the spinal cord damaged but not completely severed. He used terms like partial paralysis and extensive rehabilitation and quality of life adjustments. All I could focus on was how small Emily looked surrounded by all that medical equipment. How unfair it was that a 7-year-old would pay such a price for an adult's insecurity. Dad began making phone calls with grim efficiency once we were alone with Emily. First to his mother, asking her to come immediately to help with Emily's care. Then to his brother Ethan, a contractor who lived 2 hours north, asking about wheelchair accessibility modifications for our house. Each call was brief and businesslike, but I could see Dad's hands shaking as he dialed. He was building a support network, preparing for a reality none of us had imagined just hours before. Mom appeared at the end of the hospital corridor as we were talking to another doctor about Emily's immediate treatment plan. A nurse intercepted her, and I could hear raised voices as Mom demanded to see her daughter. Dad didn't even acknowledge the commotion, keeping his focus on the doctor's explanation of the upcoming surgeries and therapy protocols. But I saw how his knuckles went white as he gripped his phone, how his jaw muscles worked as he ground his teeth. That evening, Grandma Sarah arrived with an overnight bag and the kind of practical efficiency our family desperately needed. She hugged us both, told us she'd already arranged extended leave from her job, then went straight to Emily's bedside. Emily's face relaxed slightly when she saw her grandmother, someone who had always represented safety and stability. Grandma began talking softly to Emily about her garden, about the butterflies she'd seen that morning, normal things that didn't involve danger or competition or fear. While Grandma sat with Emily, Dad showed me his phone screen. Mom had already posted on social media about the tragic accident at the quarry, complete with crying emojis and requests for prayers. She'd crafted a narrative where she was a devoted mother dealing with every parent's worst nightmare, conveniently leaving out her role in creating that nightmare. The comments were full of sympathy and support from people who had no idea what really happened. Dad screenshot everything, adding it to a folder he'd created. The next morning brought a harsh new reality as Emily woke up more alert and aware of her situation. Physical therapists came to evaluate her, gently moving her legs while she watched with frightened eyes. They tested for sensation, asking her to tell them when she felt touch or pressure. Emily winced at some points but couldn't feel anything below her knees. The therapist made notes on her chart, professional but unable to hide the concern in her expression. Mom tried to visit again during the morning shift change, this time bringing an enormous teddy bear and dozens of balloons. She'd clearly spent the night shopping, trying to buy her way back into Emily's life. The nurses, who had been briefed on the situation, politely but firmly told her she couldn't see Emily without Dad's permission. Mom left the gifts at the nurse's station, and through the window, I watched her crying in the elevator as the doors closed, still clutching one small balloon. Dad's brother Ethan arrived that afternoon, and the two men huddled in the corner of the waiting room for an intense discussion. I caught fragments of their conversation about emergency custody paperwork, documentation of Mom's behavior, and legal options. Ethan kept shaking his head in disbelief as Dad showed him photos and videos on his phone. I realized Dad had been documenting more than I knew, preparing for a possibility he'd hoped would never come. Emily's first surgery was scheduled for 2 days later to stabilize her spine and prevent further damage. The morning of the surgery, we sat in the surgical waiting room, each lost in our own thoughts. Dad paced relentlessly, checking his phone every few minutes. Grandma knitted to keep her hands busy, the clicking of her needles a rhythmic soundtrack to our anxiety. Mom showed up halfway through the procedure, but hospital security escorted her to a separate waiting area after Dad spoke with them quietly. The surgery went well, technically speaking. The surgeon successfully stabilized Emily's spine, inserting rods and screws to hold everything in place. But his update afterward was sobering. While they'd prevented further damage, the existing trauma was extensive. Emily would need months of physical therapy just to regain partial function. Walking normally was unlikely. Running, jumping, playing like a regular child seemed impossible. Dad's fist clenched so tight his knuckles went white, but he thanked the surgeon politely. That night, while Emily slept off the anesthesia, Dad made more phone calls. To the bank about setting up a medical expense account. To his insurance company about coverage for long-term care. To his employer about family medical leave. He was systematic, methodical, building a framework to support Emily's new reality. I heard him tell his boss he'd need to work from home indefinitely, that his daughter came first. His boss, who had known our family for years, immediately agreed. Mom's harassment began almost immediately. She sent me dozens of text messages that night, alternating between apologies and accusations. Photos of Emily as a baby, videos of them playing together when things were normal, long rambling paragraphs about how she never meant for this to happen. She blamed Dad for making her feel inadequate, blamed me for taking his side, blamed everyone but herself. I didn't respond to any of it, but I kept everything, following Dad's example of documentation. A social worker visited on day 4 to assess the situation. She interviewed each of us separately, asking careful questions about Emily's home life, the events leading to her injury, and our family dynamics. Dad had prepared a folder with printed screenshots of Mom's social media posts, bank statements showing the drained savings, photos of Emily with the axe wound, and a timeline of escalating dangerous behavior. The social worker took notes professionally, but I saw her eyebrows rise several times as she reviewed the evidence. Emily began physical therapy while still in the hospital, starting with simple exercises to maintain muscle tone in her paralyzed legs. The therapist was patient and encouraging, but Emily struggled with the reality that her legs wouldn't respond to her commands. She tried so hard, her face scrunched in concentration, willing her toes to move. Sometimes there was a flicker, a tiny response that gave us hope. More often, there was nothing, and Emily would turn her face away to hide her tears. On the 6th day, Mom managed to sneak into Emily's room during a shift change. I found her standing over Emily's bed, stroking her hair and whispering frantic apologies. Emily's heart monitor started beeping faster, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. She kept her eyes squeezed shut, pretending to sleep, but her distress was obvious. I hit the call button and told the arriving nurse that Mom wasn't supposed to be there. Mom turned on me with a fury that made me step back. She accused me of poisoning Emily against her, of turning the whole family against the only parent who truly understood fun and freedom. She said I was jealous of her special bond with Emily, that I was helping Dad steal her baby away. Security arrived before she could say more, escorting her out while she screamed about her rights as a mother. Emily didn't open her eyes until she was sure Mom was gone. After that incident, Dad moved quickly to formalize protective measures. He met with a family lawyer Ethan had recommended, bringing all the documentation we'd collected. Photos of Emily on the roof, the receipt for the bounce house bought with their savings, medical records from the axe wound, witness statements from neighbors who'd seen concerning incidents. The lawyer reviewed everything with growing alarm, finally stating that we had more than enough evidence for emergency custody modification. Our house felt impossibly empty without Emily's presence. Her drawings still decorated the refrigerator, her toys scattered in the living room exactly where she'd left them. Dad and I took turns staying at the hospital, making sure Emily was never alone and that Mom couldn't sneak in again. We brought her favorite books, reading to her for hours. Her stuffed animals crowded the hospital bed. Anything to make the sterile room feel less frightening. Mom's behavior grew increasingly erratic as her access to Emily was restricted. She showed up at my school, trying to convince the office staff that she needed to take me out for a family emergency. When that didn't work, she waited by my car, begging me to talk to Dad on her behalf. She called Dad's work so many times that his boss had to get HR involved. She even contacted Emily's teacher, spinning elaborate stories about Dad keeping her from her daughter, painting herself as a victim of his controlling behavior. One evening, while Dad was meeting with the lawyer about a restraining order, I sat with Emily as she picked at her hospital dinner. She could only manage a few bites, her appetite gone along with her ability to walk. She asked me quietly if she would ever be able to ride her bike again, run in the park, or climb the jungle gym at school. I didn't know how to answer, so I held her hand and told her we would figure it out together, that no matter what, she was brave and strong and loved. Grandma Sarah had essentially moved in with us, taking over the household management Dad and I couldn't handle. She cooked meals we barely ate, did laundry, made sure I got to school. but most importantly, she stood guard at the hospital during the hours Dad had to work. She turned Mom away multiple times, calm but immovable. Once, Mom tried to push past her, and tiny Grandma Sarah blocked the doorway with surprising strength, telling Mom that Emily's well-being came before anyone's feelings. The medical bills began arriving like an avalanche of bad news. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. Surgery, hospital stay, medications, equipment, therapy. It all added up to numbers that made Dad's face go gray. He spent hours on the phone with billing departments and insurance representatives, fighting for every covered service. I heard him on the back porch one night, talking to Ethan about possibly selling the house to cover expenses, his voice breaking as he considered our options. Emily had good days and bad days in those early weeks. Sometimes she worked hard in physical therapy, gritting her teeth through exercises that should have been simple for a 7-year-old. The therapist praised her determination, but we could all see the frustration when her legs refused to cooperate. Other days, she just cried, asking why Mommy made her jump from the high rock, why Mommy didn't listen when she said she was scared. The therapist said the emotional trauma might take longer to heal than the physical injuries. Mom hired her own lawyer, someone known for aggressive tactics in custody battles. Papers arrived at our house demanding visitation rights, claiming parental alienation, suggesting Dad was manipulating Emily against her mother. Dad wanted to tear them up, but he carefully smoothed them out and added them to his documentation file. Every accusation Mom made, every lie she told became evidence of her refusal to accept responsibility for what she'd done. Ethan helped Dad install security cameras around our house on a weekend when I took Emily to a movie. They covered every entrance, the backyard, even the driveway. Dad didn't explicitly say he was worried about Mom trying something, but we all understood. The locks were changed too, reinforced deadbolts that couldn't be picked. Our home was becoming a fortress, protecting Emily from the person who should have protected her most. 7 weeks into our hospital routine, Emily felt a tingling sensation in her left foot during therapy. It wasn't much, just a slight feeling when the therapist touched her toes, but Emily's face lit up for the first time since the accident. The therapist warned us not to get our hopes too high, that recovery from spinal injuries was unpredictable and often incomplete. But that tiny bit of sensation felt like a miracle, a crack in the wall of impossibility we'd been facing. Mom's social media presence became increasingly unhinged as her physical access to Emily was cut off. She posted constantly about being kept from her baby, sharing old photos with captions about maternal love being stronger than any obstacle. She tagged Dad's employer, suggesting he was an unfit parent keeping a mother from her child. She tagged the hospital, claiming they were violating her rights. Dad screenshot everything, building a digital mountain of evidence showing her instability. The night before Emily's discharge, we had a family meeting in her hospital room. Dad explained the changes to our house, how we'd converted the dining room into a bedroom since she couldn't manage stairs. A wheelchair ramp was being installed, grab bars in the bathroom, wider doorways to accommodate her wheelchair. Physical therapists would come to the house 3 times a week. Emily listened quietly to all the modifications being made for her, then asked in a small voice if Mommy would be there when she got home. Dad knelt beside her bed and promised he would keep her safe, that Mommy needed help to get better before she could visit. Emily nodded, but I saw the fear that flashed in her eyes at the possibility of Mom returning. The ride home from the hospital felt like traveling to a different world. 8 weeks had passed since Mom took Emily to the quarry, 8 weeks that had aged us all years. The house looked the same from the outside, but inside everything had changed. The dining room held a hospital bed and medical equipment. The living room furniture was rearranged to create clear pathways. Emily's reality had reshaped our home just as it had reshaped our lives. The wheelchair ramp installation was finishing as we arrived. Emily watched from the car as workers tested the slope and secured the railings. Her face was hard to read, somewhere between gratitude and grief. This was her house, but not the home she remembered, adapted for a life she never asked for. Dad carried her inside while I brought the wheelchair, and we tried to make everything feel as normal as possible despite the overwhelming evidence that nothing would be normal again. Mom's car appeared across the street within an hour of our return. She sat there watching, not approaching but making her presence known. Dad noticed but focused on getting Emily settled, adjusting her bed and arranging her things within easy reach. When Mom finally got out and walked toward our door, Dad met her at the sidewalk. Their conversation was brief but intense, ending with Mom storming back to her car and peeling away from the curb with squealing tires. Emily's first night home was a challenge. She woke up repeatedly, disoriented and scared, calling out for help when she needed to use the bathroom or adjust her position. Each time, Dad or I rushed to her side, helping her navigate this new reality. Grandma slept on the couch nearby, ready to assist but letting us take the lead. By morning, we were all exhausted but grateful to have Emily home, even if home meant something different now. Our first home physical therapy session brought a mix of hope and frustration. Nicole, the therapist who had worked with Emily in the hospital, arrived with equipment and endless patience. She showed us exercises to prevent muscle atrophy, stretches to maintain flexibility, techniques to avoid complications from paralysis. Emily tried hard, sweat beading on her forehead as she attempted movements that should have been effortless. Some days brought tiny improvements. Others felt like moving backward. Mom's harassment continued in new forms. She sent gifts through delivery services since she couldn't approach the house. Expensive toys, books, art supplies, each package including letters proclaiming her love and minimizing the quarry incident. She wrote about how it was just an accident, how she only wanted Emily to be brave, how Dad was cruel for keeping them apart. We photographed everything before storing it in the garage, adding to the ever-growing documentation file that would eventually fill 3 boxes. The financial strain forced difficult decisions. Dad sold his motorcycle, the one indulgence he'd allowed himself, to pay for medical equipment not covered by insurance. He took on extra freelance work, typing late into the night after Emily was asleep. Grandma contributed from her pension, insisting it was what family did. We canceled cable, ate cheaper meals, and turned down the thermostat. Every penny saved went toward Emily's care. Mom showed up during one of Emily's physical therapy sessions, having learned the schedule through unknown means. Nicole was helping Emily practice standing transfers when Mom appeared at the window, tapping on the glass and waving frantically. Emily's entire body went rigid with fear. Her progress instantly reversed. I closed the curtains while Nicole wheeled Emily to her room and Dad went outside to confront Mom. The security cameras captured Mom falling to her knees on our lawn, sobbing and begging to see her daughter. Emily's emotional state fluctuated wildly as weeks turned into months. Some days she seemed almost like her old self, laughing at cartoons and playing adapted games. She learned to draw from her wheelchair, creating pictures that grew progressively darker. Her sunny butterflies and rainbow pictures were replaced by images of broken dolls and crying faces. The trauma counselor who visited twice a week used these drawings to help Emily process her feelings. But progress was slow. Mom discovered ways to maintain presence in Emily's life despite the restrictions. She volunteered at community events she knew we might attend. She befriended parents of Emily's classmates, hoping for information or access. She even joined online support groups for parents of disabled children, presenting herself as a devoted mother denied access to her injured daughter. Each attempt was documented, added to Dad's files, building a case for the restraining order our lawyer was pursuing. The school situation required careful negotiation. Emily couldn't return to her regular classroom yet, both because of her physical limitations and her emotional fragility. The district provided a home tutor 3 days a week, a kind woman who worked around therapy schedules and Emily's energy levels. We set up video calls with Emily's classmates, trying to maintain friendships and connections. But it wasn't the same, and Emily felt the isolation keenly. One morning, I found evidence of Mom's escalating desperation. Dozens of printed photos had been slipped under our door during the night. Pictures from before the accident showing Mom and Emily during happier times. Each photo had writing on the back, messages to Emily about their special bond, promises of future adventures, subtle attempts to make Emily feel guilty for staying away. The manipulation was obvious, but still painful. These weaponized memories of when our family was whole. 10 weeks after discharge, Emily achieved a major milestone. Using parallel bars for support, she stood for 30 seconds. Her legs shook with effort, sweat pouring down her face, but she remained upright. Nicole, the physical therapist, cried along with the rest of us, praising Emily's determination. It wasn't walking. might never lead to independent walking, but it was proof that Emily's body hadn't given up, even if the doctors had warned us not to expect miracles. The financial pressure eventually forced Dad to make the decision he'd been dreading. Our house, with its memories and mortgage, was too much to maintain alongside Emily's medical expenses. He found a smaller place, a single-story rental already equipped with some accessibility features. Ethan organized a crew to help us move, friends and family packing up our life while being careful not to show pity. Emily watched it all from her wheelchair, understanding more than any 7-year-old should about sacrifice and loss. Mom appeared at the house during the move, claiming she had a right to retrieve her belongings. Dad had anticipated this and had already separated her things, boxed and labeled in the garage. But Mom used it as an excuse to try entering the house, to get close to Emily. When blocked, she made a scene in front of the moving crew, crying about being kept from her disabled daughter. Ethan and his friends formed a protective barrier while Dad called the police, who arrived to find Mom hyperventilating on our lawn. The security measures at the new house were installed before we even moved in. Cameras, reinforced locks, a fence that couldn't be easily scaled. All the lessons learned from Mom's previous attempts at access. The house was smaller but felt safer, a trade-off we were willing to make. Emily's new room was right next to Dad's, close enough that he could hear if she needed help during the night. Emily's 8th birthday approached with a shadow of dread. She made me promise to help Dad keep Mommy away, the words breaking my heart. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to plan defensive strategies for her own birthday party. We kept it small, just family and 2 close friends whose parents understood the situation. When Emily blew out her candles, I wondered what she wished for. To walk again, or to never see Mom again. Physical therapy continued to yield incremental progress. Emily regained sensation in both feet, though motor control remained limited. She could stand for 2 minutes with support, wiggle her toes on command, and feel temperature changes. Each tiny improvement was celebrated, but we all knew the ultimate goal of independent walking grew less likely with each passing month. The doctors adjusted our expectations, talking about wheelchairs and crutches as permanent fixtures rather than temporary aids. Mom's campaign for access took a new turn when her own mother, Emily's other grandmother, reached out. Grandma Helen had been getting only Mom's version of events and was shocked when Dad shared the documented truth. She offered to help however she could, even if it meant testifying about her own daughter's behavior. The family fractures spread wider as relatives chose sides, some believing Mom's victim narrative, others recognizing the pattern of escalation that had nearly killed Emily. Dad's employer proved invaluable during this period, offering permanent remote work arrangements so he could manage Emily's care. His coworkers organized meal deliveries, sent gift cards, and offered emotional support without prying. These small kindnesses meant everything during days when the weight of our new reality threatened to crush us. Dad aged visibly during those months, gray creeping into his hair and lines deepening around his eyes. But he never complained. Emily developed concerning coping mechanisms as she processed her trauma. She insisted on checking door locks repeatedly before bed. She kept a whistle by her pillow in case she needed help. She made detailed plans for what to do if Mommy somehow got inside. The trauma counselor worked with her on feeling safe, but the hypervigilance remained. Every unexpected noise made her freeze. Every knock at the door triggered anxiety. The restraining order hearing was postponed when Mom's lawyer filed for additional preparation time. The delay frustrated everyone, but our lawyer assured us it would ultimately strengthen our case. More documentation of Mom's continued harassment, more evidence of Emily's fear, more proof that contact would be harmful. The legal system moved slowly while we lived in daily vigilance. Mom's attempts to circumvent our boundaries grew increasingly creative. She sent packages to Emily's friends' houses, hoping they'd be delivered secondhand. She showed up at community events where she thought we might appear. She volunteered at the adaptive sports program, forcing us to find alternatives for Emily's activities. She was a ghost haunting the edges of our life, always trying to find a way in. The day before the rescheduled hearing, Mom made her boldest move yet. She arrived at our new house with a moving truck, claiming she was retrieving belongings from our marriage. Never mind that she'd already collected her things months ago, or that Dad had documentation proving it. She stood on our lawn screaming about her rights, her property, her daughter, while Emily cowered in her room, clutching her whistle. The police response was swift this time. familiar with our situation from previous calls. They reviewed Mom's claims, checked Dad's documentation, and informed her she was trespassing. Mom's escalation in front of law enforcement only strengthened our case. She screamed about conspiracies to keep her from Emily, about Dad turning everyone against her. The officers took notes that would later appear in court documents. As we prepared for the hearing, I thought about how profoundly our lives had changed. Emily was stronger than any 7-year-old should need to be, facing daily challenges with determination that amazed her therapists. Dad had transformed from a mild-mannered office worker into a fierce protector, building legal and physical barriers around his daughter. Grandma Sarah had given up her own life to help raise Emily through her recovery, and I had gone from a typical teenager to someone who knew how to change catheter bags and perform physical therapy exercises. The hearing morning arrived with a surprise legal maneuver. Mom's lawyer filed an emergency motion claiming Dad had hidden assets that should go toward Mom's support, suggesting that denying her access to Emily was financially motivated. The judge postponed proceedings to review financial documents. Dad's hands shook as he gathered years of bank statements and receipts, showing every penny spent on Emily's care versus Mom's drainage of their savings for bounce houses and lawyer fees. During the delay, Mom tried a new approach through Emily's physical therapy center. She called claiming to be updating insurance information, then broke down sobbing to the receptionist about missing her daughter. When that didn't work, she showed up during a session, pressing her face against the glass door until security removed her. Nicole had to end the session early because Emily was too distressed to continue, another setback in her recovery. 2 days before the rescheduled hearing, our elderly neighbor knocked on our door with disturbing news. She'd caught Mom in her backyard at 3 a.m., using her fence to peer into Emily's bedroom window. The neighbor's security camera showed Mom taking measurements, apparently planning something. Dad immediately moved Emily's bed to an interior wall and installed blackout curtains. Emily didn't sleep for 2 nights, convinced Mom would find a way inside. The financial review that Mom's lawyer had requested backfired spectacularly. Not only did it show Dad's careful management of resources for Emily's care, but it revealed Mom had opened multiple credit cards in Dad's name after their separation. $23,000 in debt he didn't know existed, all maxed out on cash advances. Dad's lawyer scrambled to add fraud charges to our case while Dad spent hours disputing charges and freezing accounts. Mom's own mother provided the most damning evidence just days before the hearing. Grandma Helen arrived at our house visibly shaken, carrying a box of journals she'd found while cleaning Mom's apartment. The entries detailed elaborate fantasies about rescuing Emily, including researched wheelchair-accessible routes to Canada, lists of sedatives that could be given to children, and floor plans of our new house with access points marked. Grandma Helen cried as she handed them over, saying she couldn't let her daughter hurt Emily again. Court day began with Mom arriving in a wheelchair of her own, claiming stress-induced paralysis from being kept from her daughter. Her lawyer argued she needed accommodation and understanding, painting her as a victim of circumstances beyond her control. The performance lasted until the bailiff mentioned calling paramedics to verify her condition. Mom stood up quickly, claiming a miraculous recovery, while the judge made notes about her credibility. Dad presented our evidence methodically over several hours. Security footage showed Mom attempting break-ins at multiple times. Medical records detailed Emily's injuries and ongoing trauma. Financial documents revealed the fraud and misuse of family funds. Witness statements from neighbors, teachers, and medical professionals painted a picture of escalating dangerous behavior. The judge's expression grew increasingly grim as the pattern of harm became undeniable. Emily's testimony was provided via video link from a secure room in the courthouse. She spoke clearly despite visible trembling, describing her fear of Mom, the nightmares about water and falling, the panic attacks when she heard Mom's voice. When asked directly if she wanted to see her mother, Emily shook her head so vigorously that her wheelchair moved. The judge noted not just her words, but her obvious physical distress at the thought of contact. Mom's testimony unraveled her case completely. She contradicted herself about the quarry incident, first claiming Emily wanted to jump, then saying it was an accident, finally blaming Dad for not being there to stop it. She insisted the roof access had been safe, supervised fun. She minimized the axe wound as a minor scratch blown out of proportion. When shown photos of Emily's injuries and medical reports, she actually suggested Dad must have made them worse to make her look bad. Her own lawyer seemed to shrink in his chair. During a recess, Mom cornered me in the courthouse bathroom. She grabbed my shoulders, her fingers digging in painfully, begging me to tell the judge that Emily needed her mother. Her eyes were wild, desperate, no longer seeing me as her daughter, but as an obstacle to Emily. I screamed, and security rushed in to remove her. The red marks on my shoulders were photographed and added to evidence, another example of Mom's inability to control herself. The judge's decision was swift and comprehensive. A permanent restraining order until Emily's 18th birthday, no contact of any kind. Mom would be arrested if she came within 500 feet of Emily, our home, or Emily's school. No letters, no gifts, no third-party contact. The judge stated clearly that Mom posed a significant physical and psychological threat to Emily's well-being. Mom screamed at the announcement, calling it a conspiracy, claiming her love was being criminalized. Bailiffs moved to flank her as she advanced toward Dad's table. Outside the courthouse, Mom made one final desperate attempt. She broke free from her lawyer's grip and ran toward Dad's car where Emily waited with Grandma Sarah. I instinctively moved to block her path while Dad started the engine. Mom's fists pounded on my back as she screamed Emily's name, begging her to look at her, to remember their love. Police intervened quickly, but Emily had heard everything through the car windows. She was curled into a ball in her wheelchair, sobbing with her hands over her ears. The immediate aftermath of the hearing brought an unexpected peace. For the first time in months, Emily slept through the night without checking locks or clutching her whistle. The constant anxiety that had lived in our house began to ease. Mom's legal harassment couldn't continue without risking arrest. The restraining order gave us a shield, imperfect but real, against her destructive presence. Mom's attempts to violate the order began within days, but were now met with immediate consequences. She sent letters through various relatives who didn't understand the situation. She created fake social media accounts to try contacting Emily's friends. She even hired a plane to fly a banner over our house saying, "Emily, Mommy loves you." Each violation was documented and reported. After the third incident, her own lawyer dropped her as a client, unwilling to continue enabling illegal behavior. Emily's recovery accelerated in Mom's enforced absence. Within a week of the hearing, she stood for 5 minutes during physical therapy. Her muscle control improved, and sensation returned more consistently. Nicole commented that the reduction in stress was clearly impacting Emily's physical progress. Hope crept back into our therapy sessions, though we remained realistic about limitations. The financial aftermath took months to unravel. Dad fought every fraudulent charge while managing mounting medical bills. Ethan organized a community fundraiser that raised enough to cover 3 months of therapy. Local businesses donated equipment and services. Our new church provided meals and emotional support. The community that had watched Mom's descent into dangerous obsession now rallied to help Emily heal. 6 months after the hearing, Mom was arrested for violating the restraining order. She'd been caught on school property during Emily's virtual graduation ceremony, trying to watch through classroom windows. The criminal charges meant jail time, finally providing absolute protection. Emily's response to the news was complicated relief mixed with sadness for the mother she'd once known. Emily's physical progress exceeded all expectations over the following year. She progressed from standing to taking supported steps with forearm crutches. Each achievement required enormous effort and often ended in exhaustion, but Emily persisted with determination that amazed everyone. The day she walked across her bedroom unassisted, we all cried. She would never run or jump like other children, but she could walk. The impossible had become possible through sheer will. Dad rebuilt our family's stability through careful planning and sacrifice. He earned a promotion that required longer hours but allowed continued remote work. The balance wasn't perfect, with Dad often working late into the night after Emily's bedtime. But bills got paid, therapy continued, and slowly our crisis transformed into a manageable new normal. The financial pressure eased enough that we could occasionally afford small celebrations of Emily's progress. As Emily's 9th birthday approached, she made a remarkable request for a pool party. This child, who had developed a terror of water, wanted to face her fear directly. With careful planning and multiple safety measures, we organized a small gathering at a therapeutic pool. Watching Emily float with her friends, laughing and splashing within her limits, I saw healing that went beyond physical recovery. She was reclaiming pieces of childhood that trauma had stolen. Mom's letters from prison went unopened and returned. Emily made this decision independently, telling Dad she didn't want to know what Mom had to say. She wasn't ready for forgiveness or contact, might never be. The trauma counselor supported this boundary, noting that Emily needed to control her own healing process. The letters eventually stopped coming, though we heard Mom continue to write them, filling notebooks with words Emily would never read. 2 years after the accident, Emily competed in an adaptive sports event. She raced her wheelchair with fierce concentration, her face showing the same determination that had carried her through countless therapy sessions. She didn't win her race, but crossing the finish line brought a smile that lit up the entire track. She was no longer defined by what had been taken from her, but by what she'd fought to achieve. Dad found unexpected love with a physical therapist from the rehabilitation center. Marcus understood our family's journey intimately, having witnessed parts of Emily's recovery. He approached our complicated dynamic with patience and respect, never pushing for a role he hadn't earned. Emily observed him carefully for months before rendering her verdict. When she asked if Marcus could come to her school play, we knew acceptance had been granted. As Mom's release date approached, we prepared for potential renewed contact attempts. Legal protections remained in place, but we knew prison might have changed nothing about her obsession. Emily, now 12 and wise beyond her years, participated in safety planning. She knew Mom might try to return, but also knew she had a family that would protect her. The fear remained, but no longer controlled her life. Our family portrait looked different than anyone would have imagined 5 years ago. Emily walked with crutches, but stood tall. Dad carried stress lines and gray hair, but smiled more freely. Grandma Sarah moved more slowly, but remained our emotional anchor. I had traded a carefree adolescence for early adulthood, but found purpose in protecting my sister. We were scarred, but not broken. Changed, but not defeated. The cost of Mom's desperate need to be the fun parent was calculated in more than medical bills and legal fees. It was measured in Emily's careful steps, in Dad's sleepless nights, in Grandma's heart medication, in my own lost innocence. But survival creates its own mathematics. We measured victory in Emily's laughter returning, different in pitch but genuine in joy. We counted success in quiet mornings without fear, in birthday parties without defensive plans, in the ordinary milestone of a child going to school. Mom's obsession with being loved had cost Emily the ability to run freely through playgrounds. Her need to win an imaginary competition had stolen years of carefree childhood. Her refusal to see danger in pursuit of fun had rewritten our family's entire future. But in forcing us to rebuild from catastrophe, she had unknowingly created something she could never break. A family bound not by blood alone, but by the choice to protect each other at any cost. Emily still dreams sometimes about falling, wakes up gasping and reaching for rails that aren't there. But more often now, she dreams of painting, of friends, of the adapted dance class she joined last month. She dreams of futures that include her wheelchair and crutches as tools rather than limitations. She dreams of becoming an architect who designs accessible spaces, of helping other children who've survived trauma. She dreams forward, not backward, and that might be the greatest victory of all. I think about the family we used to be, before Mom's jealousy poisoned our home. We were ordinary in all the best ways, unremarkable in our happiness. Now we are extraordinary in our survival, remarkable in our resilience. We are a family that faced the unthinkable and refused to let it define our limits. We are proof that love isn't measured in dangerous freedoms or competitive fun, but in showing up every day to do the hard work of healing. This morning, as I write this final entry, Emily is in the backyard practicing walking between parallel bars Dad and Marcus installed yesterday. Her progress is slow but steady, each step a small rebellion against the limits others set for her. Mom remains in prison for another 6 months, but she occupies less space in our thoughts with each passing day. The restraining order stands ready if needed, but Emily's strength has become her greatest protection. The fence Mom bloodied her hands on that terrible morning has been replaced. The new one is taller, stronger, designed to keep danger out rather than memories in. But sometimes I catch Emily looking at it, and I know she remembers too. The difference is that memories no longer have the power to paralyze her. She acknowledges them and returns to the business of living, of moving forward one careful step at a time. We are not the family we were supposed to be. We are the family we chose to become when faced with impossible choices. We are Emily's champions, her protectors, her cheering section for every small victory. We are proof that family isn't about being fun or winning affection through grand gestures. It's about showing up when life falls apart, holding steady when the world spins wrong, and finding reasons to celebrate in the midst of permanence loss. We are scarred and strong, broken and beautiful, forever changed and finally free.